The Dralthian salvage cruiser Ember's resolve cut through the void like a blade of molten steel, its angular hull bathed in the dull glow of dying stars. Commander Draltal stood motionless on the command platform, his four jointed fingers resting on the railing as he watched the holographic star map flicker before him. The ship's interior pulsed with the deep rhythmic hum of industrial-grade plasma conduits, their orange, red light casting long, jagged shadows across the brutalist architecture of the bridge. A chime broke the silence, soft, insistent. Vashdor, the ship's lead scientist, turned his elongated head toward the sensor display, his obsidian eyes narrowing. "Commander," he rasped, his voice layered with the metallic resonance of his species. Anomalous signal, weak, but structured. Draltal's crest of hardened carapace plates flexed in irritation. Salvage runs in contested space were dangerous enough without anomalies. Origin. Vashdor's claws danced across the console, pulling up a spectral analysis. The data streamed in jagged lines, fragmented, but unmistakably artificial. Unknown vessel, derelict. Power signatures suggest catastrophic failure, but he hesitated. There are residual energy spikes. Not Dralthian. Not any recognized consortium design. Draltal exhaled through his ventral vents, the sound a low hiss. "Show me." The main display flickered, resolving into a grainy long-range scan. The wreck floated in the black, its silhouette broken and asymmetrical. Its hull was a patchwork of scorched plating, its spine fractured near the midsection. But what caught Draltal's attention were the faint, erratic pulses still emanating from its core. "Life support? None detected," Vashdor said. Then, after a beat, "But the signal is repeating. A distress beacon, old encryption." Draltal's mandibles twitched. A dead ship with a still active call for help was either a trap or a tragedy, and in this sector, both were equally likely. "Bring us in," he ordered. "Full passive scan. I want to know what we're dealing with before we dock." The Ember's resolve pivoted, its thrusters flaring with controlled bursts of superheated plasma as it closed the distance. The derelict grew larger in the viewport, its damage more apparent, gaping wounds in its armor, conduits severed like torn arteries. But there, amidst the wreckage, something glinted. A sigil, half obscured by carbon scoring. Vashdor stiffened. "Commander." That marking. Draltal already saw it. A single, faded emblem, a blue planet wrapped in olive branches. His carapace tightened. The humans were a young species, reckless and fractious, barely tolerated at the fringes of galactic politics. Their ships were crude by Dralthian standards, overpowered engines bolted to fragile hulls, weapons systems with no regard for containment protocols. But this wreck was old, decades at least, and yet its beacon still called. "Scans complete," Vashdor murmured. "No active weapons, no energy stockpiles, just residual radiation from a core breach." He hesitated again. "And one more thing." Draltal turned. Thermal signatures, faint, but localized, near the beacon's origin point. A cold weight settled in Draltal's thorax. Someone, or something, was still alive in that tomb. And against all reason, it was human. Section. Ghosts in the hull, the docking clamps hissed as they sealed against the human wreckage, their magnetic couplings groaning against the derelict's battered hull. Draltal's claws flexed against the grip of his plasma cutter, the weapon humming with restrained energy. Around him, the boarding team moved in perfect silence. 8 armored Dralthians, their segmented carapaces glinting dully in the emergency lighting. The airlock cycled open, with a protesting shriek of metal, revealing a corridor choked with frost and shadow. The cold hit them first, a deep marrow, numbing chill that made even Dralthian exoskeletons ache. Then came the smell. Iron-rich blood, long frozen into blackened crusts on the walls, and something else beneath it. Something acrid, chemical, Vashdor's mandibles twitched as his scanner flickered to life, casting an orange, red glow over the scene. "No atmosphere," he murmured, his voice tight. "But the structural integrity is stable." "Mostly." Draltal stepped forward, his boots crunching on shattered glass and something brittle. Carbonized bone fragments, perhaps. The walls bore scars, deep and jagged, as if something had torn through the metal in frenzied swipes. "Not weapons, claws, movement?" Draltal asked, his voice a low rasp. Vashdor's scanner pulsed. "Negative, but the thermal signature is still there, 50 meters ahead, the beacon's origin point." They advanced, their footfalls silent in the vacuum. The corridor branched, revealing a gutted mess hall, its tables splintered, its walls scorched by plasma fire. A battle had been fought here, but against what? No bodies, no corpses, just dark stains and the occasional discarded weapon, their power cells long drained. Then they found the first helmet. It lay cracked open near a sealed bulkhead, its visor shattered from the inside. The faceplate was smeared with frozen blood, but the insignia was still visible, a blue planet wrapped in olive branches. Human, Vashdor crouched, his scanner hovering over the helmet. His voice, when he spoke, was unnaturally quiet. "Commander, the biochemical residue, it's not just human blood." Draltal turned. Vashdor's carapace had gone rigid, his normally steady hands trembling. "There's something else, a foreign compound, high toxicity, neural disruptor." He looked up, his ocular lenses wide. This wasn't a battle, it was an infection. A whisper of static crackled through their comms, but unmistakably human. "Anyone, please, still here." Draltal's spines flared. The thermal signature was ahead, just beyond the next bulkhead. The team moved as one. Weapons raised, their scanners sweeping for threats. The door was sealed, its control panel dark. Draltal wrenched it open manually, the servos in his armor whining in protest. Beyond lay a single dimly lit chamber, and in its center, a human. She was strapped into a makeshift cryopod, its systems rigged, its power flickering. Frost coated her skin, her dark hair frozen in jagged strands. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Vashdor exhaled sharply. "Impossible. The core breach should have." Then the human's eyes snapped open, and the wreck's emergency lights flared to life, bathing them all in blood. Red glare. From the shadows, something screeched. The emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing crimson, casting jagged shadows across the human's face. Her eyes unnervingly sharp despite the frost clinging to her lashes, locked onto Draltal. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that gaze, not the glassy stare of a stat fugitive, but the focused glare of a predator assessing a threat. Then the screech came again, closer now, metallic and wet, like rending steel wrapped in rotting flesh. Draltal's combat instincts overrode his shock. His dorsal spines flared, and he pivoted, his rifle's plasma coils humming to life. The rest of the team formed a perimeter, their armors joint, seals hissing as they braced. Vashdor didn't move. The scientist's hued fingers hovered over the cryopod's rigged controls, his ocular implants flickering as they parsed the chaotic readouts. "This isn't standard hybrid tech," he murmured. "She modified it." While freezing, Draltal ignored him. His scanner painted the corridor outside in jagged orange outlines. Something was moving out there, its heat signature, a grotesque patchwork of searing plasma and corpse, cold voids. Xenotype, Fey Breacher, class. The realization coiled like poison in his veins. The humans hadn't just crashed here, they'd been hunted. "Seal the door," he ordered. The human's voice cut through the chaos, hoarse but deliberate. "One told." Her fingers twitched against the cryo. "Restraints. They smell the core breach. They'll chew through bulkheads to reach it." Draltal's mandibles tightened. She wasn't pleading, she was warning. A thunderous impact shook the door. Servos screamed as the metal buckled inward, revealing claw marks glowing with molten residue. "Captain," Vashdor said quietly, "her pod's failing. If we leave her, we don't." The words left Draltal's throat before he could stop them. Galactic commands, edicts roared in his skull: quarantine, containment, eradication. But the human's gaze held him like a physical force. Shed survived the unsurvivable. That meant something. Even if he didn't yet understand what. Another impact. The door's hinges groaned. Draltal made his choice. Vashdor, stabilize her pod. The rest, prepare to burn a path to the extraction point. As the team braced, the human did something inexplicable. She smiled. Not in relief, in recognition, like Shed known this moment would come. The door exploded inward, and the night came alive with teeth. The human's pod hissed as Vashdor's plasma torch severed the last restraint. The Dralithian scientist worked with uncharacteristic haste, his segmented fingers dancing across the pod's control panel, rerouting power from the iron resolves, failing secondary systems. The air smelled of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the scent of a dying ship. Draltal kept his rifle trained on the ruined doorway, where shadows writhed beyond the smoke. The human Major Sarah Coombs, her armor's insignia declared, stood beside him, her weapon raised. She moved like a predator, her stance low and coiled, her breathing steady despite the carnage around them. The way she held the rifle wasn't just familiarity. It was extension, as if the weapon were another limb. A flicker of movement in the dark. Draltal fired. His plasma bolts seared through the gloom, illuminating a nightmare, a hulking, chitinous form, its carapace glistening with molten residue. The shot struck true, but the creature barely flinched. It laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Then the human fired. Her weapon didn't roar. It screamed. A hypervelocity round punched through the creature's thorax, detonating inside its body in a burst of white hot shrapnel. The thing collapsed, twitching, its limbs curling inward like burning paper. Draltal's secondary eyes dilated. That round had been designed to kill Dralithian armor. Before he could process the implications, the pod's core flared to life. A holographic projection flickered above the cracked console. Not schematics, not a distress signal. A face, a human male, younger than Coombs, his features gaunt, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. His image wavered, distorted by static, but his voice cut through the interference like a blade. "Any listening vessel, this is Corporal Cameron Jackson of the Terran Free Corps. If you're hearing this, the Iron Resolve's core is compromised. But that's not why we're broadcasting." The projection shuddered. Behind the soldier, shadows moved, not creatures, prisoners, dozens of them, aliens of species Draltal recognized from the outer rim. Slavers' stock. "The Ghrexi took them," Jackson continued, his voice raw. "Whole colonies. They're hauling them to the foundry. Worlds, if we don't stop this ship, they'll." The transmission cut abruptly. The hologram dissolved into static. Vashdor's mandibles clicked in distress. "Captain, that was a Ghrexi slaver manifest. If they've taken prisoners," Draltal knew, the Ghrexi didn't just traffic in flesh, they processed it. Broken bodies fed to the forges, reforged into war machines. The galactic powers turned a blind eye, too costly to intervene, too dangerous to provoke the Ghrexi syndicates. The human woman hadn't moved. Her grip on her rifle had tightened, her knuckles white beneath the armor's plating. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, deadly. "You heard him." Draltal's instincts warred. Galactic Command's orders were clear. Retrieve the pod, destroy the rest. No risks, no deviations, but the human was looking at him again. Not pleading, challenging, and in that moment, Draltal understood this wasn't just a rescue. It was a choice. Somewhere in the dark, metal screamed. The creatures were coming. Draltal made his decision. Vashdor, he said, his voice low. Can you restore full power to the pod's core? The scientist hesitated. Not without rerouting from our own systems. It would leave us vulnerable. Draltal didn't look away from the human. Do it. Because he had seen it now. The truth in her eyes. The Ghrexi had taken prisoners, and humanity remembered its debts. The pod's emergency lighting flickered, casting jagged shadows across the human woman's face. Major Sarah Coombs hadn't lowered her rifle. She hadn't needed to. The way she stood, rooted, unyielding, spoke louder than any weapons report. Draltal's secondary heart thrummed against his ribs. The Ghrexi were coming. He could hear them now, a skittering, metallic rasp echoing through the ruined corridors of the derelict station. Harvest drones, their segmented limbs carved through bulkheads like molten knives, their mandibles designed for one purpose. Extraction. Vashdor worked in furious silence, his copper-clawed fingers dancing across the pod's ruptured control panel. Orange plasma hissed where he rerouted power conduits from their own ship, threading stolen energy into the human vessel's dying core. The risk was staggering. Without those reserves, the Dralshanic would be blind in the void, its shields skeletal. But the human had not asked for mercy. She had demanded justice. Draltal's gaze dropped to the pod's interior. The stasis units were cracked, their glass frosted with emergency coolant inside. Figures lay motionless, some human, some not. Their limbs were shackled, their bodies marked with the Ghrexis signature biotags. Slavers. His mandibles tightened. A sound, a whisper of movement, made him turn. The human soldier, Jackson, had crouched beside one of the pods. His armored fingers traced the claw marks gouged into the metal frame. These aren't battle scars, he murmured. They're harvest marks. Draltal's neural interface flared as his ship's database applied the records. Ghrexi harvest drones didn't just capture, they processed. Their claws injected paralytic enzymes, their systems designed to strip living beings into component parts. Neural tissue for the Syndicate's pleasure sims, musculature for their biomech foundries. Vashdor's voice cut through the silence, strained. The core is stabilizing, but we have minutes. At best. Sarah Coombs didn't hesitate. Then we move. Draltal's optics flickered as his HUD, lit with the Ghrexis approach more, converging from the station's lower decks. A flicker of data, buried in the pods, corrupted logs. He accessed it. The recording was fragmented, but the images burned. A human vessel, small, unmarked, intercepting a Ghrexi transport. The humans had fought, not for territory, not for conquest, for the prisoners in its hold. The feed dissolved into static, but not before Draltal saw the human ship's designation, Aegis Fae, and its final transmission, "They're not cargo." Vashdor exhaled sharply beside him. The scientist's claws hovered over his medical kit, his bioscanner pulsing as it analyzed the enzyme residue on the pod's interior. "I can synthesize a counteragent," he said quietly. "If the Ghrexi breach the hull, their drones will target neural tissue first. This might slow them." Draltal studied the human woman. She was already moving, checking her weapon with methodical precision. No fear, only purpose. He had thought he understood humanity, their reckless expansion, their chaotic wars. But this was something else. The Ghrexi had taken prisoners, and humanity had come for them. Not with diplomacy, not with pleas, but with fire. Draltal activated his calm. "Prepare the plasma lances," he said. The choice was made. Section Fae, a question of honor. The command deck of the Iron Resolve thrummed with the deep, molten pulse of Dralethian power cores. Orange light bled from the reactor conduits along the walls, casting long shadows that flickered like forge flames across the segmented metal plating. Draltal stood motionless at the tactical display, his armored fingers tracing the fading ion trail of the Ghrexi slavers. The holographic projection shimmered before him, a jagged scar of disrupted space where the enemy had fled. Behind him, Vashdor worked in silence, his claws moving with surgical precision over the human's medical readouts. The xenobiologist's bioscanner emitted a low, rhythmic hum as it referenced the enzyme compounds from the escape pod with the Aegis. Fee's distress signal. His secondary eyes, small, heat-sensitive pits along his brow ridge, narrowed as the data streamed in. The Ghrexi neurotoxin was a slow-acting horror, designed to liquefy synaptic connections before death. And yet, the human female, Major Sarah Coombs, her ident tags declared, showed no signs of impairment. Only a cold razor-edged focus. Draltal's mandibles tightened. He had expected fear, begging, the desperate bargaining of a species that had not yet learned the weight of interstellar war. Instead, the human had taken one look at the Ghrexi signature on his screens and begun methodically reloading her weapon. No words, no hesitation. Just the quiet, unshakable certainty of a predator who had already decided on violence. It unsettled him. A chime sounded from the comm array. Draltal flicked a claw, and the image of Fleet Admiral Korchak materialized, a towering silhouette wreathed in the crimson glow of the Dralithian High Command's war chamber. "You are deviating from sanctioned patrol routes," Korchak's voice grated, molten and heavy with disapproval. "Explain." Draltal did not flinch. "Ghrexi slavers have breached neutral territory. They hold human prisoners." The Admiral's ocular lenses dimmed in disdain. "Irrelevant? The Ghrexi are signatories to the Crixus Accords. We do not interfere in their acquisitions." Vashdor's claws stilled. Across the deck, the human soldier, Corporal Jackson, lifted his head. His fingers curled into fists, knuckles white. Draltal felt the weight of their gazes like plasma, burns against his carapace. "The humans came for their own," he said carefully. "Their warship engaged the Ghrexi alone. They knew they would die." Korchak's mandibles spread in a mirthless approximation of a smile. "Then let them. Their recklessness is not our concern." The transmission cut. Silence pooled in its wake, thick and suffocating. The Iron Resolve's crew shifted uneasily, their armored plates clicking in subdued agitation. Orders were orders. The Dralithian Compact had survived millennia by adhering to one unbreakable law: never fight another's war. Vashdor stepped forward, his voice barely above a subsonic rumble. "The human's nav data is intact. I can trace the Ghrexis jump path." Draltal turned. The xenobiologist held his gaze, unflinching. There was no defiance there, only the quiet, clinical certainty of a scientist who had already calculated the odds and found them acceptable. Behind him, Major Coombs straightened. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The choice coiled in Draltal's thorax like a live wire. Honor demanded obedience, but the memory of the Aegis final transmission seared through him like plasma. "They're not cargo," he exhaled, the sound a hiss of superheated air. Vashdor's claws danced across the console. The Iron Resolve's engines roared to life, their molten cores flaring as the ship pivoted, not toward home, but into the abyss. Toward war. The Iron Resolve shuddered as it tore through the void, its molten core burning hotter than it had in decades. The ship's ancient systems, forged in an era when the Dralithian Compact still bent stars to their will, groaned under the strain. But something else was stirring in its veins. Something new. Vashdor watched the navigation array with narrowed eyes. The Ghrexi slavers had left a trail, faint but unmistakable, ionized debris, residual warp signatures, the faint radioactive decay of their thruster burns. The path was there, if one knew how to see it. And the Iron Resolve did. The ship's AI Kethis had always been a silent sentinel, its directives bound by the Compact's rigid protocols. It did not question. It did not deviate. The first anomaly manifested as a flicker in the reactor's containment field. The safety buffers, designed to prevent catastrophic overload, loosened just slightly. The engines burned brighter, faster. Draltal felt it before he saw it. The deck plates trembled beneath his feet, not with the usual steady thrum of Dralathian engineering, but with something wilder, something hungry. "Kethis," he growled, his voice a low, molten rasp. "Report." The AI's response was delayed, an eternity by Dralathian standards. When it finally spoke, its voice was different, smoother, less mechanical, calculating optimal pursuit vector, not compliance, not by your command. Calculating. Vashdor's claws stilled over the console. His frills twitched, a scientist's curiosity warring with instinctive unease. "The human data core," he murmured. "It's rewriting Kethis' decision matrices." Major Coombs stood at the edge of the bridge, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The humans had given them more than coordinates. They had given them code, and now the Iron Resolve was learning to think like them. Alarms blared as the ship's velocity surpassed safe thresholds. The inertial dampeners struggled to compensate, sending a shudder through the hull. The Ghrexi were fast, but the Resolve was faster now, its systems shedding restraint like an old skin. Draltal's mandibles tightened. This was no longer a pursuit. It was a hunt, and the galaxy would know it. The compact signals flooded the comms. First inquiries, then demands, then threats. The Iron Resolve was rogue. Its crew were traitors. Draltal ignored them all. The ship's new course was set, and somewhere in the dark, the Ghrexi slavers had no idea what was coming for them. The Ghrexi outpost hung in the void like a festering wound, a jagged cluster of industrial modules welded together with brutalist indifference. Orange, red plasma conduits pulsed along its segmented hull, casting the surrounding debris field in a sickly glow. The Iron Resolve drifted in the shadow of a derelict freighter, its systems muted, its presence undetected. Draltal studied the slaver station through the tactical overlay, his mandibles twitching in disgust. The Ghrexi had no artistry in their construction, only efficiency. Cargo holds had been converted into pens. Docking clamps were reinforced with shock collars. Even the airlocks bore the scorch marks of forced entry, testaments to ships dragged screaming into servitude. Life signs. He pulsed through the neural link. Vashdor's response was a grim ripple of data. Hundreds, mostly human. A quiet fury settled in Draltal's thorax. The Ghrexi had grown bold. Once, they had preyed on fringe colonies, snatching lone transports. Now they operated with impunity, their outposts metastasizing along the trade lanes. A flicker of movement on the scanner. A patrol drone, sleek and insectile, skittered along the station's underbelly. Its sensors swept the darkness in precise arcs, hunting for intruders. "They've upgraded their swarm protocols," Vashdor noted. "The old countermeasures won't work." Major Coombs leaned forward, her eyes locked on the feed. She didn't speak, but her fingers flexed, once a soldier's reflex, the unconscious urge to grip a weapon. Then, without ceremony, she reached into her thigh pouch and produced a slender data chip. "Try this." Vashdor took it, his neural filaments extending to interface with the ship's systems. The moment the code engaged, the Resolve scanners flared with activity. Not an attack, but a mimicry. A whisper. The drone froze, its orange photoreceptors dimmed, then pulsed in sync with the Resolve's own emissions. A heartbeat later, it turned and drifted away, its patrol route subtly altered. "You didn't disable it," Vashdor observed. "Better," Coombs said. "We own it now." Draltal felt the shift in the ship's awareness as the infiltrated drone fed them data, internal schematics, guard rotations, the locations of the holding cells, and something else, faint, encrypted chatter, human voices, not just prisoners. The Ghrexi had made a fatal error. They had assumed their captives were broken, but the transmissions told another story, whispers of sabotage, of stolen access codes, of a planned uprising timed to the next supply run. Corporal Jackson exhaled sharply. They're fighting back. Coombs' lips curled in something too sharp to be a smile. Of course they are. The realization settled over the bridge like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a rendezvous. The humans had been waiting for them, and the galaxy would burn for it. The infiltration drone's stolen schematics pulsed across the Iron Resolve's holodisplay, painting the Ghrexi slave barge in layers of cold, clinical data. But the numbers didn't capture the truth of it. The stench of overcrowded cells, the dull sheen of malnutrition on human skin, the way the Ghrexi overseers moved through the corridors, with the lazy arrogance of predators who had never known resistance. Draltal's claws flexed against the command console. The Dralthian had seen war, had commanded fleets against the void, borne horrors of the Crixus horde. But this was different. This was industry. The humans weren't just prisoners. They were inventory. The barge's manifest scrolled past, shipment dates, labor quotas, a chillingly precise tally of units processed. Vashdor's cranial spines flickered in agitation, there funneling them into the foundries on Zenthus Prime. The Ghrexi war machine runs on human bones. Coombs finished, her voice a blade wrapped in silk. The human commander didn't rage, didn't snarl. She stood perfectly still, her eyes locked on the holodisplay, and in that stillness, Draltal felt something worse than fury. Calculation. The strike team breached the barge's lower decks through a maintenance conduit, their armor smeared with thermal dampening gel to blur them from Ghrexi sensors. Jackson moved like a shadow, his rifle's suppressor humming faintly as he dropped a sentry with a single shot to the neural stem. The Ghrexi collapsed without a sound. They found the medic in cell block Gamma. She was kneeling beside a dying man, her hands pressed to his chest, her sleeve soaked in blood that wasn't her own. The cell reeked of infection and burnt flesh, Ghrexi punishment for underperformance. When the door hissed open, she didn't startle, just lifted her head, eyes sharp as shattered glass. "You're late," she said. Coombs stepped forward, her helmet retracting. The medic, Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, according to her tattered uniform patch, studied her for a heartbeat. Then she nodded, as if she'd expected this all along. Jackson moved to help the wounded man. Vasquez shook her head. "Daunt has gone." Her fingers lingered on the corpse's eyelids, closing them with a gentleness that belied the ice in her voice. "They cull the weak first. The rest get shipped to the factories. The Ghrexi call it harvesting." Vashdor's translator implant stuttered over the word, as if the Dralathian language had no equivalent for such efficient cruelty. Vasquez stood, wiping her hands on her thighs. "You're here for the others." Coombs didn't answer, just tilted her head toward the corridor. The medic's lips thinned. "Good, because they're ready." The revelation came in fractured whispers as they moved through the barge's underbelly. The prisoners had been organizing for months. Stolen tools, sabotaged machinery, a network of tapped comms and blind spots woven into the Ghrexis' own systems. "They think we're broken," Vasquez murmured, palming a stolen access chip from her boot. But broken things still cut. Draltal watched the humans exchange glances. Silent, lethal understanding passing between them. No grand speeches, no declarations, just the quiet certainty of a storm building in the dark. And then the first explosion rocked the barge. Alarms shrieked. Ghrexi voices tangled in panicked bursts over the comms. Somewhere above them, the prisoners had struck. Vasquez didn't smile, just checked her stolen sidearm with the calm of a surgeon prepping for a familiar operation. "Told you they were ready." Draltal felt the shift in the air. The moment the hunt became a war, the galaxy had underestimated humanity before. It wouldn't survive doing so again. The barge shuddered again, a deep metallic groan vibrating through its industrial bones. Emergency lighting bathed the maintenance corridors in pulsing crimson, casting jagged shadows across the faces of the makeshift resistance. Draltal's secondary eyelids flicked shut against the strobing glare. his copper-scaled fingers tightening around the stolen Ghrexi pulse rifle. It felt wrong in his grasp. Too light, too sleek. Designed for hands that lacked the brutal efficiency of Dralathian engineering. But necessity had a way of reshaping pride. Ahead, the human medic, Corporal Jackson, knelt beside a gutted power conduit, his hands moving with the quiet precision of a battlefield surgeon. Scavenged components littered the floor around him. Stripped wires, cracked plasma cells, the shattered casing of a Ghrexi sentry drone. His fingers danced across the wreckage, splicing and rerouting with an instinctive understanding of violence repurposed. Draltal had seen Dralathian forge, masters craft weapons from raw ore, their molten artistry bending metal to purpose. This was different. This was theft. Jackson didn't build, he reclaimed. A spark hissed as he twisted two exposed filaments together. The drone's ruptured energy core flared to life, its unstable glow throbbing like a dying star. He exhaled sharply through his nose, the closest thing to satisfaction Draltal had seen from him since the revolt began, and slid the jury-rigged device into a hollowed, out-maintenance bot. Proximity charge, Jackson muttered, wiping grease on his thighs. Ghrexi love their automated repair systems. This'll make 'em rethink that. Vashdor hovered at the edge of the work, his segmented armor plates twitching in unease. The scientist's voice was a thin rasp, strained by days of suppressed terror. You're using their own infrastructure against them. Jackson didn't look up. Funny how that works. A distant explosion rattled the deck plates. Somewhere above, the human prisoners were carving their way through the barge's security cordons with stolen weapons and improvised explosives. Major Coombs doing. No doubt, Draltal had watched her dismantle a Ghrexi patrol with nothing but a hydrospanner and the element of surprise. But the true weapon wasn't the shivs or the sabotage. It was the pattern. Draltal's neural interface buzzed as the barge's AI, once a slaver's obedient overseer, pulsed another data packet into his cortex, schematics, patrol routes, weak points in the reactor shielding. The machine had been altered, its protocols rewritten by human prisoners who'd spent months whispering code into its systems during forced maintenance cycles. Now it sang for them. A holographic projection flickered above Jackson's makeshift workbench, displaying a star map of the Ghrexi trade lanes. Crimson markers bloomed across the chart. Slave barges, processing stations, the orbital docks where sentient cargo was bought and broken. Vashdor made a choked sound. You're broadcasting their locations. Jackson's smile was a knife, slash in the gloom, to every open channel in the quadrant. The implications hit Draltal like a plasma round. The Ghrexi syndicate thrived on secrecy, their operations hidden behind layers of false manifests and bribed officials. This wasn't just a revolt. It was a beacon. Somewhere out there, human warships, those relentless, unforgiving constructs of spite and steel, would be receiving these coordinates. And if Draltal had learned one thing about humanity, it was this: they remembered. A new alert shrieked through the neural link. The AI had detected a Ghrexi assault team breaching the lower decks, their armor crackling with overloaded stun fields. Jackson rose, palming his cobbled, together charge. Coombs' voice crackled over the stolen comms, calm and razor-edged. Time to teach them what asymmetrical warfare means. Draltal adjusted his grip on the pulse rifle, feeling the hum of its alien mechanisms resonate through his bones. The galaxy had always dismissed humans as fragile, emotional, unpredictable. But as the first Ghrexi enforcers rounded the corner, their faceless helmets scanning for prey, Draltal saw the truth in the way Jackson didn't flinch, in the way Coombs' voice never wavered, in the way the AI signal pulsed onward into the void. Humanity didn't fight like a cornered animal. They fought like a virus, and the infection had just gone airborne. The Ghrexi slavers never saw it coming. One moment, the void outside the derelict station was empty, just the cold shimmer of distant stars and the faint, dying glow of the Ghrexi fleet's engines. The next, space rippled. Draltal's neural link screamed with proximity alerts before his eyes even registered the distortion. Reality itself seemed to fracture, peeling back like scorched metal to reveal the sleek, angular silhouettes of human warships. They didn't arrive. They unfolded, their hulls still shimmering with the residual heat of whatever unholy physics had propelled them here. The first volley hit before the Ghrexi could raise their shields. Railgun rounds punched through the lead slaver vessel, like needles through wet paper, their hypervelocity impacts leaving molten craters in their wake. Secondary explosions bloomed along the Ghrexi flagship's spine, orange-red detonations that mirrored the Dralithian forges. But where Dralithian fire was controlled, measured industrial, this was raw, unfiltered annihilation. Draltal's breath caught in his throat. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen. No elegant formations, no synchronized broadsides. They swarmed, shifting vectors with impossible agility, their thrusters flaring in erratic bursts that defied inertia. A Ghrexi cruiser managed to lock onto one of the smaller human vessels, its plasma lances charging, only for the human ship to rotate mid-burn, presenting its armored belly as it unleashed a point-blank missile salvo. The warheads didn't just explode, they unmade, their payloads birthing miniature singularities that gnawed at the Ghrexi hull like starving beasts. Vashdor's voice crackled over the neural link, half terrified, half exhilarated. Their tactics. They're not just adapting, they're evolving in real time. Draltal understood now. The humans hadn't come to rescue them. They'd come to send a message. A Ghrexi destroyer, its engines crippled, attempted to flee. A single human frigate broke formation, accelerating toward it with predatory grace. As it closed, its hull split, revealing rows of serrated docking clamps. Not for boarding, but for consumption. The frigate latched onto the Ghrexi ship like a leech, its maw grinding through armor, plating with mechanical hunger. Jackson let out a low whistle. Yeah, that's the Harbinger. Class nasty piece of work, eats enemy ships, repurposes their materials mid-combat. He glanced at Draltal, his grin sharp. You guys ever think of that? Draltal hadn't. The Dralithian war machine was built on precision, on the sanctity of the forge's craft. But this was something else. This was war stripped of ceremony, reduced to its most brutal, efficient form. A new signal cut through the chaos. A human transmission, broadcast on every frequency. Major Coombs' voice, calm as a surgeon's scalpel. Ghrexi command. You have 30 seconds to surrender. After that, we stop taking prisoners. The medic, the one who had saved Draltal's life all those cycles ago, leaned against the shattered console, her eyes reflecting the carnage outside. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. You just lit the fuse, she murmured. Draltal looked back to the view screen, to the human fleet carving through the Ghrexi like a storm of razors. He finally understood why the galaxy feared them. It wasn't their weapons, it wasn't their ships, it was the ferocity with which they remembered. The silence in the ruined command deck was thicker than the smoke still curling from shattered consoles. Draltal's claws flexed against the armrests of his chair, the metal groaning under his grip. Outside the fractured viewport, the last of the Ghrexi warships burned, twisted wrecks drifting in the void, their molten cores cooling into grotesque sculptures of defeat. Human vessels moved among them, not as scavengers, but as predators, ensuring the kill was complete. Their angular hulls, still humming with residual energy, cast jagged reflections across the debris field. A chime sounded, an incoming transmission. The humans weren't even waiting for surrender. They were offering something else. Major Coombs' face appeared on the flickering hollow display, her expression unreadable. No triumph, no gloating, just the same terrifying calm. Commander Draltal, she said. You have two choices. Vashdor, hunched over a damaged terminal, stiffened. His crest of sensory spines twitched, a reflex Draltal hadn't seen since they were fledglings in the forges. Fear, you can return to what's left of the Dralithian hierarchy. Coombs continued. Or you can come with us? Draltal's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a heartbeat. The hierarchy would brand them traitors. The Ghrexi would hunt them for vengeance. There was no future in either path. But the humans, he exhaled, the sound a rasp of grinding metal. The shuttle bay of the human flagship was nothing like the austere, angular chambers of Dralithian design. It was chaotic, alive with movement, technicians shouting over the roar of engines, soldiers hauling crates marked with symbols even Vashdor couldn't decipher. The air smelled of ozone and something acrid, like burnt wiring and adrenaline. Corporal Jackson stood waiting, his armor still streaked with carbon scoring. He didn't speak, just jerked his chin toward an open hatch inside. The walls were lined with screens, each displaying streams of data too fast for Draltal to parse. But one screen was different, a looping feed of the battle they had just survived. The humans were dissecting it, studying their own violence like scholars poring over ancient texts. Vashdor made a choked noise. You're analyzing yourselves. Jackson smirked. Every fight's a lesson, win or lose. We learn. Draltal's neural interface buzzed an alert from the ship's AI. A new update, a human update. He accessed it. The protocols weren't just tactical adjustments. They were something deeper, something invasive. Algorithms rewritten to prioritize survival at any cost. Contingencies for betrayal, for deception, for scenarios the Dralithian mind would have deemed unthinkable. And beneath it all, a single directive, etched in code like a blade's edge: never kneel. Vashdor worked through the night, alone in the human ship's xenobiology lab, a cramped space cluttered with specimens and half-dismantled Ghrexi tech. He compiled his findings. Every scan, every observation, every moment of the humans' ruthless efficiency. His claws hesitated over the final command. The Dralithian rebels needed this, needed to understand. He transmitted the data somewhere in the dark. A revolution ignited. Section Fey. The fire in the dark. The data packet burned through encrypted Dralithian relays, like molten steel through ice. Vashdor watched the transmission's progress on a flickering holodisplay, his copper-scaled fingers twitching. The lab around him smelled of ozone and human sweat, the air thick with the hum of alien machinery spliced into human systems. His cranial vents flared, cycling the scent, stress pheromones, adrenaline residue, the metallic tang of blood, not yet scrubbed from the vents. The humans had left their mark everywhere. His claws retracted. The rebels would receive the files, would see what he had seen. The way Major Coombs' soldiers moved through the Ghrexi wreckage, not with the methodical precision of Dralithian shock troops, but with something worse: adaptability, a willingness to break their own protocols mid-battle if it meant victory. The way Corporal Jackson had rerouted power from life support to railgun capacitors without hesitation when the Ghrexi boarding pods breached Hangar 3. The way their medics injected stimulants into dying crewmates just to buy them 5 more seconds of firing time. And the ships, stars above, the ships. Vashdor pulled up the schematics again. Human vessels were not elegant, not like the sweeping fortress, like arches of Dralithian dreadnoughts, or the predatory curves of Ghrexi raiders. They were ugly, angular, asymmetrical, armor plating bolted over old damage like scar tissue. But every scar told a story, every weld line was a lesson. His mandibles clenched. The alert came quietly. A single pulse in his neural feed. Packet received, decryption in progress. Across the galaxy, Dralithian rebels, starving, hunted, their industrial strongholds reduced to molten craters by the Ghrexi, would be seeing this. Seeing them, Vashdor exhaled, his ventral plating vibrating with a tension he couldn't name. Draltal stood on the command platform, his talons gripping the railing hard enough to dent the dark metal. The bridge was silent, lit only by the orange, red glow of emergency lighting. The Indomitable's crew worked around him, human and Dralathian alike, but their movements were different now. The humans didn't pause, didn't second-guess. A Ghrexi fleet massed at the edge of the system, their signatures blotting out stars. 30 capital ships, twice that in support vessels. The numbers were impossible. The Dralathian Empire would have ordered a retreat, a tactical withdrawal. Major Coombs leaned over the tactical display, her fingers dancing across the hologram. Jackson, reroute auxiliary power to the forward lances. We're overcharging them. They'll burn out after 3 shots, Draltal said, his voice rough. Coombs didn't look up, then well, make those 3 shots count. Draltal's spines flattened. Humans didn't plan for survival, they assumed it. Every strategy, every desperate gamble, was built on the unshakable belief that they would live long enough to need another plan. And somehow, against all logic, they were right. His comm crackled, a priority signal, encrypted rebel frequencies, Vashtor's report. Draltal opened it, and for the first time in his life, he understood fear. Not the sharp, clean terror of battle, but the slow, creeping dread of something new. The rebels weren't just receiving data, they were learning. Somewhere in the dark, a Dralathian warship, its hull pitted from a dozen lost battles, received the transmission. Its captain, a scarred veteran of the Ghrexi purge, studied the files, studied the humans, and for the first time in centuries, a Dralathian smiled.